So I want to discuss this one particular couple clientele that I had that I think really helps people understand kind of a complexity of what occurs for a lot of people in a lot of different ways. So this couple came to me, and the man was, of course, he was complaining about their mixed matched libidos. And of course, in this scenario, he had the higher one, and he wanted me to basically fix his wife, right? So whenever I hear about this mixed matched of libidos, it gets me really, really curious. So especially because if we look at the data, we understand that 20-30% of those are biological, life changes, stressors, pregnancy, perimenopause, menopause. Like there's a lot of different varieties of things that can be going on with the body that are biological that can create that. But 70 to 80% are really more psychological or psychological related or psychological adjacent in some way. So in this scenario, my curiosity is first, number one, what are this guy's stressors? And of course he had quite a bit. And then the next question is well, how do you emotionally regulate? And you might not have guessed, but he did not have a lot of ways. So what became obvious pretty quickly was that he utilized sex in a couple different ways. One was his wife became his method of resetting his neural system. So she was his stress relief. And so when you make your partner responsible for your emotional state of being, they become the container of you. They're responsible for your emotional state of being. What do we call that in relationship energetics? Well, we call a container, we call that masculine energy. So she's acting masculine energy. So if we just ask what happens to polarity right off the bat, it's going to take a nosedive from her side because she's being asked to be the container. When she becomes the pharmacy or the medication, it's no longer about intimacy. One of the other aspects that I get curious about is how do y'all connect intimately in other ways other than sex? What? There are other ways? Oh yeah, there's a whole bunch of other ways, right? Relationally, emotional, like you look that up. Like spend some time with that. Go down that rabbit hole a little bit. So if you did nothing else but, Gottman's love maps or got on Google or ChatGPT and asked, give me 5, 10 questions that start an emotional conversation with my wife to where we can have, like my wife and I, we do coffee once a day. It's like Gottman's, they recommend 15 minutes every day to where we spend time connecting in conversation. That's another form of intimacy. And there's a seesaw effect, ironically, that if you can get intimacy in other ways, which not everything has to be about sex, it really doesn't, but this amazing thing begins happening if you have intimate moments of connection, not sexuality, with even male friends, right? To where there's real, honest conversation about other things that are going on in your life. Your need for intimacy with just that one thing, it begins going down. So a part of this is us learning how to have more capacity for how we receive our intimacy needs. So we're looking at stress reduction, we're looking at coping mechanisms or processing mechanisms, we're looking at, coming up with new ways for intimacy. But in this particular client, if we go all the way back to childhood, which we eventually did in some of the sessions, we discover what? Well, we discover a moment with the father figure where there was a core wound of what? Self-worth. There was a self-worth wound that happened in childhood. And in the way that he was raised, sex became a way that he received what? Validation. So there you see these different layers of things that are all contributing to this. So when we go back and we, with whatever way, EMDR, somatic experiencing, somatic processing, some version, and we actually process the childhood trauma that created the defense mechanism that needs the validation as a coping mechanism for that wound. And if we can get that arousal cycle to complete through process, well, then he doesn't have the same lever that's engaging that part of his neural system trying to protect itself on a subconscious basis. So I know this has been long, but do you see how all the dots kind of connect? So when we talk about men doing the inner work, those were 3 completely different areas, but when you go and work on all of the areas, guess what happens to that libido? Well, and why? Well, because she's not having to provide the container anymore, she begins to relax and feel safe. And safety is kind of a whole other issue we want to talk about as a bare minimum standard, which is why we wrote the book Safe as well. But get curious about you and how you work, and don't just operate on a a topographical level, guys.